Good afternoon. Welcome to Lunch with Books. If you wouldn't mind silencing your cell phones, you know the routine, most of you do. Just a couple of announcements before I bring out our guest. Upstairs, we have a brand new display of Wheeling Santa Claus from Cooey Bents and Stones. Check it out. There's also an online component. Yoga is the People's University. And so we have 5 classes for you starting in January. The brochures are out. Next Tuesday, the 19th, the Major boys and their dad will be here. They said they needed some percussion to make the horns and strings sound better. So they're bringing Daddy plays bass. Then we'll take a little break. Oh, there's also an exhibit upstairs called Born of Rebellion, which is about West Virginia statehood. It was made by the West Virginia Humanities Council, but they used some photos from our archive, so check that out. It's here until mid-January, I believe. And December 10th, just a while ago, was 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which the United Nations passed, and the United States was a big supporter, and Eleanor Roosevelt was one of the brains behind it. It's something we've lost track of, but this is the 75th edition of the Universal Declaration. These are free if you want one. If you take one, you have to promise to read it and pass it to someone else who needs to read it, because it has all the rights you're used to in our Constitution and Bill of Rights, but also some additional things that will make you think, and we can talk about it. Okay. Mike Florio is back. He's one of the leading writers, as you know, reporters, commentators covering the NFL. His website is profootballtalk.com, and it is the primary clearinghouse for all NFL news and analysis for more than 2 decades. Mike was here in August, and he talked about his novel, Father of Mine, which many of you bought. But not everybody got a copy, so he brought some more with him today, if you're interested. But he's here today primarily to talk about his new Christmas-themed book called On Our Way Home. And you can get it for only $10, and the proceeds benefit an animal shelter. So it's a good cause, good Christmas gift. Welcome back, Mike Florio.
Thank you all for coming back out. It's great to be back. I love coming up here any chance I can get, especially during the holidays. It's a special time of the year, and it was just fun. And it's such a quick drive that I enjoy the opportunity to come up, and I appreciate all of you for showing up. If any of you have read On Our Way Home, there's a scene early in the book where the main character, John Percepio, is getting ready to deliver a fairly important closing argument. He's getting ready to deliver a very important closing argument, and he's got his booklet of notes that he's ready to use because it's complicated, and he's got every point that he's got to make. And he decides at that point he is finally going to give it a try without his notes. And at the moment he decides to do that, something very significant happens, and there we went. And something very significant happens, and I won't spoil it, but I hope that doesn't happen to me. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. And if you read the book later and you remember, you know what I was referring to. So, since the last time I was here, I think back to late August, and it was a great time. It was a special day, and a lot's happened since then. A lot of football's happened since then. I've had COVID for the first time since then, which I never thought I was going to get it, and I finally got it, and it was no big deal. But then a week later, I got a kidney stone. Now, who's had a who's had a kidney stone? Yeah. So I had no idea what to expect. I'd heard about the kidney stone experience, but I thought that's never going to happen to me. It hit me in the middle of the night in a hotel that we stay at in Connecticut, 4 a.m., the day before a full Sunday of football. And I thought I pulled a muscle. It's like, well, there's no muscle there to pull. Like, what is that? And as I was thinking about it, it got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse. And you know that moment where you know that you're going to have to go to the hospital, but you're just trying, no, I don't, yeah, I do. No, yeah, I got to go to the hospital. And so 4 a.m., had to find an Uber, had to wait for the Uber driver to show up, sweating profusely, went into the hospital, and they said, can we get the full spelling of your first and last name? And I was bent over, it's like, I'm dying. Can I give you my name after you give me some drugs? And I did learn that morphine is overrated, but Toradol is incredibly underrated. That's what they give the football players so they can play on Sundays. That worked. And I didn't know how long of an experience it was going to be. I was back in the hotel a few hours later. It got past the point where it was causing maximum pain. I never felt anything after that, but I would never wish that on anyone if you've lived through it once. And I talked to somebody who's had one 5 times. Can't imagine it. So it's been an eventful football season. And any day that I don't have a kidney stone is a great day. And December 15th, it's a perfect day to be here because when I was a kid, you'd have those markers in your head as you go through the month of December, as you get closer and closer to Christmas, because you just want it to be Christmas. And the 15th was always kind of like, we're over the hump. Here we go. This is it. And I always loved the 15th because then I knew we're in the final countdown to Christmas. And Christmas was just such a great time when I was growing up, and it always meant a lot to me. It was a great time for family. It was a special feeling. The month of December, everything kind of changes. People are nicer to each other. There's just a feeling of positivity floating around. And you always think maybe this year it'll last beyond Christmas, and it never does, which makes it special when it happens the next December, because it always comes back around, and you have that 1 month out of the year where everything's pretty and everybody's nice and everybody gets along and it's great. And then it's gone, and then it comes back. And that rhythm of the year, especially in the month of December, and you feel things differently and you think of things differently. What happened to me about, I'd say now 15, 20 years ago, my mother died in 1995, my father died in 1998. And about 10 years after that, I just started to get like this kernel of an idea, kind of a what if. And it was along the lines of, what if they would just show up now? As they would be now. What if they had lived another 10, 15 years? And they would just show up at my door. Would I even know who they are 10 or 15 years later after they had passed? What would they want from me? What would they say? Would I even realize what was going on? And every year from that point, and it was about 15 years ago, that thought would come back to me in December. And then by January, when we all get back to normal and everybody stops being so nice and it's not Christmas time anymore, it would go away. And it kept coming back every year, and it would go away, and it kept coming back. And as I explained when I was here back in August, once I started writing fiction as a supplement to the coverage of the NFL that I do every day, and realized I could actually do it, whether or not it's any good isn't up to me, but I realized I can actually do it, that feeling came back again, and after ignoring it, or just not really doing anything with it, not thinking anything of it, but that what if, I sat down one day, popped open the laptop, and just started. And that was December of 2021. First chapter took me a couple of hours, and the first chapter in the final version of the book is about 95% of exactly what I wrote that night. It's like, all right, well, I got something. We'll see where it goes. Next night, another chapter. Okay. So far, so good. We'll see where it goes. Next night, I wrote another one. And I never really know where I'm going with any of these. I go about halfway, and then I try to figure out how I'm going to land the plane. I just kind of randomly take the plane into the sky, and then at some point I figure out how the book is going to end. And that's kind of what I did. By the middle of December, all right, here we are. I got an idea of how this is going to go. And all that what if, that thread that I started to pull. I pulled it harder and harder and harder, and finally got to the point where I had a finished story. I knew how it was going to conclude, got it done right around Christmas time. So now what do I do with it? Again, this is 2 years ago. Now at the time, my agent, I called him up, And I was very excited because I said to him, you know what, I think this is good. I don't know because I'm incredibly biased. I wrote it, I created it. I'm always going to think it's good, but I think this is good. I really think I got something. What's it about? I said, it's a Christmas book. He said, stop. Don't write Christmas books. It's like, what were you talking about? There's Christmas books everywhere. No, they don't make any money. Nobody wants to publish them. They only sell for 2 or 3 weeks out of the year, and then they go back into the warehouse, and it's just not a good business model. Don't write Christmas books. I said, okay, well, let me rephrase it then. It's a ghost story. I didn't write. Because it is kind of a Christmas ghost story, and I'll explain it more a little bit later. So he wasn't interested, and it's lurking on my hard drive somewhere, and I got to figure out what to do with it. And I was just gonna, like so many other manuscripts, I have 8 of them now, and I just figure out what I do when the Spirit moves me. How am I going to proceed with it? Where's it going to go? Where's it going to end up? Last year around Thanksgiving, I thought, you know what? I've got this website that literally hundreds of thousands of people visit every day. I'll just post it there. And I'll treat it like an Advent calendar. I posted 1 chapter a day, right around Thanksgiving, right until Christmas, 1 chapter at a time. And let's just see. Let's see if people like it. Let's see if they don't like it. The thing about the business I'm in, if people don't like it, they'll tell you. They have no hesitation to say, that stinks. And I get emails all the time. I've probably gotten some since we started today, telling me how stupid I am, how wrong I am, why are you wasting your time, why don't you retire, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to see what the reaction would be. I made my email address available and just waited. And I could tell by the traffic people were reading it, and it's a good sign. And then I started getting the emails. And it's like, wait a minute, where are the ones telling me how bad it is? Where are the ones saying that this is stupid, that this is embarrassing, that this is a waste of your time? It was a waste of my time. I wish I could have the 20 minutes back that I read that chapter. So all of the feedback was positive. And it was rewarding. And there's a theme in the book that I really didn't intend when I wrote it. And it's a theme of reconciliation and redemption among family members. There are too many broken relationships among families. And I wasn't thinking of that until I started hearing from people who would say, I hadn't talked to my father in 10 years. Your book inspired me to call my father. I haven't spoken to my mother, haven't seen my mother, haven't seen my grandchild, haven't spoken to this person, spoken to that person. And, again, I didn't intend it, but the message in there sort of is, life's too short to let stupid, petty differences get in the way of the most important relationships you can have, and that's relationships with family. Family is everything, and I preach that all the time. Anytime the topic comes up on any of our shows, any discussion, any conversation I'm having with anybody, it's like, look, when in doubt, fix that relationship, make it right, swallow your pride. So many of these dumb divisions that happen between families start over some stupid little thing, some dumb disagreement, misunderstanding, somebody disrespects somebody. You got to put it aside, and you got to fix the relationship before it's too late. And again, I wasn't intending that when I wrote. When I started hearing that over and over again from people who were reading it, it's like, all right, I'll take it. If it's in there and I didn't mean it to be in there, good. And the one that really struck me, I got an email late December, early January from someone who suffered from serious PTSD, work-related, and had been unable for decades to feel any human emotion. Nothing, flat line. No good, no bad, no anything. He read on our way home last year when we posted on the website, and near the end it's a roller coaster of emotions. He said at that moment, his ability to feel came back in that moment. And it may have just been dumb luck, maybe it would have been anything that caused his ability to feel to come back, but something about the book, the way it ended, it awakened again for him the ability to feel emotion. And I sent the message to my wife and I said, look, whatever else happens with this book, this is worth it. Whatever else happens with any fiction that I write, if there's someone out there that it helps in a positive way, it's worth it. And that's what caused me to decide this year, instead of just posting it on the website again like I had last year, I will, and it was not very expensive to print a book up. If publishers don't want to print up Christmas books, fine, I can do it myself. It wasn't that hard. I had a designer in New York City who put the layout together. My nephew, Anthony Zeech, is an incredibly gifted designer. He did the cover, and the cover is awesome. It really captures the feeling of the story. And after you read it, you go back and look at the cover, and you see stuff there that you'll understand that's in the book, that's reflected in the cover. And we put it together, and I said, all right, we're going to sell it this year, and we're going to see what happens. And, it's not about the money. Anytime anybody says it's not about the money, it's always about the money. I've said that my entire life, but it's not about the money. And I mean it's not about the money. It's $3.99 for the ebook, it's $9.99 for the print version, and every penny I get goes to the Humane Society of Harrison County. My wife and I became dog people in the last 5 years. She had a dog when she was young, but she didn't pay much attention to it. I never had one, never wanted one. My mother would not have allowed one. And once we got a dog, that was it. It was over. Now, the Humane Society also provides care and feeding for rescued cats. And I really don't care about cats, but I can't separate them. I can't separate the dog and cat money. If I could, a dog, just feed the dogs, forget about the cats. So I got nothing wrong with cats other than I think they would kill you and eat you if they could. It's graphic, but it's true. I think it's true. Don't fall too sound asleep around. So that's the backstory on how we kind of got to this point of it's in print and it's available, and hopefully folks will read it, hopefully they'll enjoy it, and hopefully it'll affect them in a very positive way during the holidays. Because this really is the time of year to kind of reflect, mend those fences, repair those relationships before it's too late. And one of the other messages too, sometimes it's too late to repair that relationship. Sometimes the person you'd like to repair the relationship with is gone. You gotta find a way to forgive yourself. You gotta find a way to move on. You gotta find a way to reconcile with what's occurred and find a way to turn it into a positive. Even if that means it's inspiration to fix relationships with others that you haven't had the best relationship with. So the book itself, the one bit of feedback I got this year that was negative was, it's very dark. It's very dark. The main character is kind of a jerk. It's very depressing. It's gloomy. And that guy really dragged me down. And I was like, oh, like Ebenezer Scrooge? Like him? Right? I mean, think about A Christmas Carol. A miserable old bastard who hates Christmas and everything about it. And until he is dragged through his past, present, and future by a series of ghosts and sees a barren cemetery with his own name on the tombstone, does he realize what Christmas is all about, and that he should quit being a miserable old bastard. So it's dark too. It's dark, but there's a payoff. And, my other point is, think of George Bailey. Life ruined. His poor Uncle Billy had lost the deposit. He's standing on the bridge ready to jump in, wishing he was never born. That's dark. That's gloomy. That's depressing. But there's a payoff. And I think some of the best stories take you through that stuff. The main character in this book goes through some stuff. And at the end, I don't want to spoil the ending, but obviously, 99.9% of anything you read or anything you see is going to have a happy ending. You can't sell something with a bad, sad ending. There's a happy ending there, but I recently heard someone explain that the best endings are both surprising and inevitable. When you get there, you say, oh, wow, I didn't see that coming. And then you think, you know what? I should have seen it coming. And that's the hardest thing to craft. Because how many times do you watch a movie and you know exactly where it's going, you know exactly how it's going to end? You read a book, it's like, why am I even reading this? I know exactly how this thing is going to end. I know exactly how this is going to play out. So that's the challenge, and that's what I think I was able to do, and that's what I always strive to do. You want it to be a surprise. You want that last thing to be, oh my gosh. And then you throw another little oh my gosh at the end. I think I have two oh my goshes at the end. You're going to have one, and then you're going to have another one that you didn't really expect. So again, I don't want to spoil it. And and I'm struggling because I don't want to give away too much. I mean, obviously, the main character is visited by the ghosts of his parents. I've already told you that much, and that's just part of it. I mean, he really doesn't know who they are. He doesn't know what they want. He's got one family member who sees them. He's got other family members who don't. And when are they going to pop up again? And ultimately, why are they here and what do they want? And that's where the action really comes together at the end. And yeah, I can't say any more without giving it away. I really don't want to give it away. Has anybody read it so far? Has anyone read it? Anyone already read it? All right. Well, hopefully you enjoyed it. You wouldn't be here if you didn't enjoy it. I'm just going to assume you enjoyed it. But I continue to get good feedback on it, and I loved writing it. It was just a special month for me. And it's just one of the other ones that just goes into this pile of books that eventually are going to show up somewhere, somehow, just like Father of Mine. I was talking to Denny earlier, the sequel to Father of Mine is still in the works. I want to get that done next year. But yeah, so that's on our way home, and I've got plenty of copies of it here. And I'll sign anything that you have. I'll sign it. It's $10, and every penny that I take with me today, I'm going to take back to the Humane Society of Harrison County. And just like last time, I'll answer any questions you have, especially football questions. But not about the Steelers. Nobody wants to know about the Steelers. Well, I don't know. There really is a feeling that something's got to change with the Steelers.
Tomlin's got to go.
Every time they hit a rough spot, there's about 30 to 40% of the fan base that says Tomlin's got to go. But think of the fact that they're the first team in the history of the National Football League that was above 500 to lose back-to-back games to teams that were 8 games or more under 500, and they lost them both at home, 5 days apart. Tomorrow's game's critical. Tomorrow's game's really important, and I don't know that the Steelers would fire him, but there's a thought that maybe he'll be ready to go. And don't be surprised if he ends up being the coach of the Commanders when it's all said and done. Not saying it's going to happen, but just don't be surprised if it happens. Yes, sir.
I've got a serious question for you here.
Oh.
I've been a Detroit Lions fan since 1951. On this year, every time I turn TV on, the announcers say how good the Lions are. And when I watch them, they do not look very good to me. So I want your opinion on whether they are good or not.
Okay, the question for those in the back, are the Lions real or are they frauds? Is that the question?
Yes. And don't hurt my feelings.
No, they're kind of caught in between. I think everybody got caught up in the fact that the Lions were finally turning around. You know, last year they started 1-6, and then they finished strong and almost made the playoffs. They had that great game to end the season on Sunday Night Football against the Packers, and they kept the Packers from getting in. And that created the anticipation they were going to be great this year. And it started off good, but their defense is a liability. We've seen that. And their quarterback's not good enough. Jared Goff's not good enough. He's got 9 turnovers in the last 4 games. And what's going to happen is after this season, they're going to realize he's one of the things holding him back. He's going to be out and find somebody else. And then maybe next year, they'll get to where you want them to be. This year, I don't win the division, but they're not going to last long in the playoffs. They may lose in the first round at home. So, any other questions?
What did you think of last night's game?
Well, it got both the coach and the general manager fired of the LA Chargers. That happened while I was on the way up here. I got a text from somebody with the team that it was happening, and it needed to happen. After last night, when you have a team that just quits like the Chargers did last night, you got 2 teams that really aren't in playoff contention. One team shows up and plays hard. The other team plays like they just want to get the season over with and go home. It's on the coach to press the buttons to get the players properly motivated to do what they need to do to go out and play those games that don't matter. Because every game matters at some level, and you got to convince them of that as the coach. So I'm not surprised the coach was fired. The general manager's been there 11 years. I'm surprised he was fired. And they're going to start from scratch. And I think Jim Harbaugh is going to be the next coach there. I don't know that. But the coach from Michigan who was with the 49ers, I think when it's all said and done, he's going to end up there.
Really?
Yes. That's just my guess. Yes, sir.
I got a writing question.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm doing a lot of football. So you didn't know the end of the book, so once you decided it, You have to go back and rewrite parts of the other chapters to fit. And
It's a great question. Again, my process is I go about halfway and I let the Spirit take me. And then the second half, I try to outline and I try to follow the outline and I know where it's going to go. But that's always subject to change. But when you get to the end, yeah, part of the editing process is go back to the beginning and make sure everything in there, every seed that's been dropped, every hint that's been given. Sometimes you put a red herring in there just to throw people off the trail as to where it's going. But once you finally get to the ending, it does affect some of the stuff at the beginning. But what I try to do is be aware of what I've already done and engineer the ending so it fits with what's already there, if that makes any sense. And it doesn't make any sense to me. I said this last time I was here. I just kind of sit down and type, and I don't think about it. And I don't know if I mentioned this example back in August. Remember the Ouija board? Did I talk about the Ouija board? Does anybody remember that? Did I talk about it? It's like the Ouija board, like this, like let's introduce the occult to our kids. Come on, go ahead and buy this thing from Milton Bradley and let's have demons enter our house. But and when you would play that as a kid, you would always think like, oh, it's actually moving while you knew that you were the one pushing it around the board. But that sensation for me, when I get lost in it, I'm not consciously forming the words. It's just happening as I watch it. And it's like I'm reading it as I write it. And it's kind of a trance, it's kind of a zone, but I just get into that, and that's where I let it take me for the first half of the book, and then I figure out where it's going to go. And most of the time, I don't have to do major reconstruction on what I've already done. And I don't know that that's right or wrong, but I think anybody that's going to do something like this, you got to figure out what your process is, and just do that, and be true to it, and hope for the best. Yes, sir.
Mike, earlier when we were talking, I mentioned about 30 American Avenue. You said it's put on the back burner. I've got about 50 books already pre-sold for 30 American Avenue. Now, down in the Edgedale section, just waiting for prep.
I'll tell my agent. I got a new agent. I fired the one who told me not to write Christmas books. My new agent, as we were mapping out a strategy for where to go forward, because I published a football book called Playmakers in early 2022 through Hachette. And one thing I learned through the process of working through a publisher, the writers don't get a whole lot of money. When it's all said and done, the publisher pockets it all, or most of it. And you gotta pay tax, and you gotta pay your agent. And that's what caused me to say, you know what, it's a lot easier for me with this built-in audience that I have to just sell to them. They're already coming to my website. I already have them in the door. I'll just sell to them. And in theory, you make as much or more that way. The difference, though, is there's something to be said for distribution. When you get a book that is published and put in bookstores, and there are still a lot of bookstores out there, you sell a lot more because there's just more people who are going to buy books. People come to profootballtalk.com not to buy books, to find out what's going on in the NFL. So the success rate of selling is a lot lower than when somebody stumbles into a bookstore, because they're showing up. Usually they don't go to browse, they want to buy something. And they're browsing with the intent of buying something. If you're getting something they're interested in, maybe they'll buy it. So, long story bearable, I've got a football-related book that delves into the gambling aspect that I think is going to be a real problem for the NFL. Players misusing inside information, players connected to the mob. And my agent said, you know what, that one's timely. That one may have a better chance of the dart hitting the bullseye. Let's sell that one first, and 30 American Avenue is after that. So it was going to be next. When I was here last time, it was on deck, but we decided to pivot to the football book.
Well, I go make people there down in the neighborhood. They keep saying, well, how do you tie a prison break with 30 American? I said, you gotta wait for the book to come.
That's good. That's good. That's great sales. I got to put you on the payroll.
I can return to find the job. So I just.
That's good. I'll give you a percentage. For anyone who wasn't here in August when I mentioned 30 America Avenue, it is a reimagination of the prison break from 1979, November of 1979, when 14, I believe, escaped at the same time, killed a state trooper, 23-year-old state trooper right outside the prison gates. And that is combined with, and this is where it's all completely fictional, a group of the prisoners end up in the neighborhood I grew up in, 2 doors down from where he lived, in a vacant lot where there was never a house, so nobody can say, hey, you're right about my house. It's always been vacant. For all the years that we lived in that neighborhood, that lot was vacant. The address is 30 America Avenue. And there's a group of neighborhood kids who get involved with the folks who broke out of the prison, and it is dark, and it is bloody, and it's a lot. And there is one very evil character in there. One thing I've learned, the best stories have a really memorable villain. Somebody that you just, like a name that resonates, and certain things about who they are and what they do that can be a little shocking. So anyway, that book involves 4 boys ultimately getting caught up with these prisoners, and it's completely made up, but that one kernel of truth is it's based on that prison break from November of 1979, which I remember vividly, because when it happens, like there's 14 killers out on the loose, and it's just 10 miles away. Like, what do we do? Where do we hide? Where do we go? Where are they going? No, they're not coming here. Well, in 30 America Avenue, they did. Have you got anything else? Yes.
I read the book and I loved the character of your father, and I loved the comments he made all the time and his humor. And I wondered how close in reality that was to your own father.
The old man that John Percepio keeps running into, completely different than the way my dad was. This guy has an acid tongue, sharp, always with some sort of funny line. My dad was quiet, never really said much of anything. So it was all part of the idea of you take this idea and then you got to turn it into something that's entertaining. So my dad's personality would have been very entertaining. He wouldn't have come up with very good lines. So I had to come up with a guy who was a little more irascible and feisty and sarcastic and just said the right thing at the right time.
It reminded me of my husband, that's why.
That's good. By the way, some of the people who read the book, they keep waiting for the old man to show up. When's the old man going to show up? The old man was here. When's he going to come back in? And they want more of the old man. A lot of people find the old man to be their favorite character in the book. Somebody back there had something.
Mike, you working on that really? I know you working on that too.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last end of it.
I know you like to come back and see the Payne brothers.
Well, no, that's the only reason I don't like coming back. No, I'm kidding. I like coming back whenever I can. My parents are buried here. I like to swing by the cemetery. I like to drive through the old neighborhood. I like to grab some pizza at Patsy's and take it home. I was up here a couple weeks ago and got 40 pieces, and I think they lasted 3 days in the house. So it's an hour and 45 minutes. So it's just nice to stay connected to where I came from. We live in the area where my wife grew up, and I told her after I was up here in August, you don't understand what it's like to still be living where you grew up. You just don't, you can't realize what that's like because you've never lived anywhere else. When you live somewhere else and you have this context of where you spent 25, 26 years, you like going back, even though it would be nice if they could fix the streets.
Oh, yeah.
But what is that all about? It's a work in progress. It's not making any progress. All right. Anything else?
What, like, gentleman that you co-host with on Fridays?
Peter King.
She really sounds like a real great guy. I mean, I know he's knowledgeable about everything.
Peter King is in his 40th year of covering the NFL.
I know he listens to him.
I remember when I first broke in 20 years ago, I was like, oh, Peter King. He is a king. And it's been fun over the past 15 years to get to know him, to work with him. And yeah, he's got a lot of good stories, and he loves to tell them. And he's actually retiring after this season. But he's been doing it for 40 years as of this year. He started covering the Bengals. He covered the Giants when Parcells was the coach. Then he went to Sports Illustrated. He's been with NBC now for about 10 years.
Maybe he'll stay on with you on Fridays and that.
Well, I hope he will, because he's got a lot to say. He's got a lot of great analysis and context. You can, take what's going on now and relate it to something that happened 15, 20, 30 years ago. And you need to have that in order to understand where things may go down. Anybody else? Sean?
I have two questions. You answered half of one. You said Patsy's. Since you're from Wheeling, I always have to ask, downtown DeCarlo's and Patsy's. I assume.
It's not even close. I mean, it's not even a question.
I'm with you.
It's Patsy's. No disrespect to downtown DeCarlo's, if there's any downtown DeCarlo's representatives here, but yeah, it's gotta be Patsy's. It's the cheese, right? Okay, we're on the same page.
Okay, great.
Only the important questions.
The other one is I can't look because of Santa Claus I mentioned, the Cooey Vents or stuff.
Wow. I remember my parents taking me by Cooey Vents with the mechanical displays in the windows. Stone's was always my mom's favorite place to shop, but there was something special about going through South Wheeling and going by Cooey Vents, and we'd never stop and walk. It was always just a car rolling by, so you get the best look you can at all the stuff that was in the window. But I don't even know when that closed, but that was always a fun time, a fun part of Christmas.
Cooey Vents was the train layout.
Yes.
Yeah.
That trains and mechanical stuff, Santa, whatever, Christmas stuff. So.
My aunt worked there from 1917 until the day it closed.
When did it close?
90s.
In the 90s. And just were there the other day,
Anybody else? Yes.
What happened to Patrick?
What happened to what?
Patrick, what happened?
Oh, well,
He lost his cool.
as Tom Brady's wife said after Super Bowl 46, my husband can't throw the ball and catch it at the same time. That's what happened. He doesn't have reliable receivers now. They thought they could win without Tyreek Hill. Last year, they somehow won a Super Bowl without him. This year, they miss him. This year, they got guys that either drop the ball or do stupid things like line up offside before a play that would have won a game. So that's what happened. He's still great. He just needs the help around him. And he's frustrated. I don't know if you saw how he reacted last week after the game. And I don't think it had nearly as much to do with the call that they disagreed with, even though it was absolutely right. You see the pictures, the play was clearly offside. It was a manifestation of frustration that he's feeling this year because they just are off a little bit. He's never played a playoff game away from Kansas City. They're going to have to do it this year, most likely. You're welcome. Anyone else? Yes?
I have two questions. Do you set a specific time to write, or do you just simply write when the thought comes?
That's a great question for anybody who didn't hear it in the back. Do I have a specific time that I write, or do I just write whenever the thought comes? I have a specific time. There's only so many hours where I can write. And usually it's at night. I go down to my barn between 9 and 11, sometimes 7 to 9, depending upon what's going on at the house. But I'll get 2 hours at a time. I'll do as much as I can in those 2 hours. And during football season, it's Tuesday night, maybe Wednesday night, Friday late afternoon, early evening, and then Saturday night, once I finish my work for the next day in the hotel for football, I'll try to write a chapter or so or work on a couple of chapters. So I get 4 nights a week during football season, it's hard to make a lot of progress during football season. I'll be glad when football season's over. I love football. I love football season, but it's getting in the way. My job's getting in the way of my hobby. So you don't want that.
And my other thought is, what are your thoughts on paying college football players?
I have many thoughts on paying college football players. That's the question. Look, I think that it is borderline criminal that the college system has gotten away for decades with paying everyone connected to college athletics except the athletes. And they've known the reckoning is coming, and they've delayed it as long as they could, but now it's here. There was a major antitrust lawsuit filed recently against the NCAA addressing point blank the failure to pay based on an antitrust violation, because the argument is they set up the NCAA to provide them cover for not paying players. Well, sorry, we can't pay. The NCAA says we can't. Well, these are all individual schools. They should be competing like any other business. It's not just, this is all we can give you, now make your choice. And it's going to hurt schools like West Virginia, because at the end of the day, we're not going to have the resources that others are going to have. But it's only right for the people who we are paying to see The kids who are playing the games, that's why we're tuning in. They need to get fairly compensated. And you'll hear people say, well, there's no way they can do it. It'll blow up the budgets. They'll find a way to do it. It's too big to fail. They'll find a way to pay them. There's more than enough money there. Some of the other people, like the coaches, might not make as much as they've been making. And it's easy to pay the coaches a lot of money. We don't have to pay the players. But I think it's long overdue for the players to be paid, and we're getting closer and closer to that every single day. Yes?
Do you think that the kid that had his leg broken in Michigan is ever going to play again?
Who's the kid that had his leg broken in Michigan?
He had the same kind of fracture that
Joe Theismann?
Joe Theismann did,
College or pro?
college.
Okay, I don't pay close enough attention to college to even know who that is. I'm all NFL, especially during football season.
It was during the Michigan-Ohio State game.
Yeah, I was traveling then. See, that's a problem. I don't watch a lot of football on Saturdays because I'm usually in a plane on Saturdays to New York, but I didn't even know that had happened.
Yeah, he was actually blocked into another player and broke both his tibia and fibula.
Well, and that's another reason why they need to be paid. You're not only adding to the bottom line, you're taking on risks that can change your life. You get a compound fracture that pierces the skin. I don't know if y'all know the story about Alex Smith, who several years ago had a compound fracture. Once your body opens up and bacteria on your skin gets inside, you can have horrible infections. His leg is maimed permanently from that. He was in horrible shape. He almost died. They almost amputated his leg, and he almost died from that infection. So that's part of the risk the players are taking. All the more reason for them to be fairly compensated for what they do. Yeah.
I don't know if you saw this week, but here in Wheeling, Federal Judge Bailey, I hope started to drive a nail into the NCAA's coffin for ruling on player deferment or player eligibility.
About transfers?
Yes.
Yeah, and the whole thing flows back to the idea that these universities are individual businesses. They can't just come together and say, we're going to set these rules that apply to all of us so we don't pay anybody anything, or we don't let the kids transfer from school to school. The coaches go whenever they want, wherever they want. The students can transfer whenever they want. Why do we put these artificial rules in place to limit the choices of the players? And that's just another example of why this reckoning is getting closer and closer. It's no different than, and this isn't a great example, it's the best one I can think of. If all the fast food restaurants out there, Taco Bell, McDonald's, Subway, Burger King, you name it, if they all came together and said, well, this is all this is our collective pay rate. These are the collective terms and conditions of employment under some umbrella of the Fast Food Association. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. These businesses should be in competition, and when they come together to limit competition, they're violating the federal antitrust laws, period. And they've been doing it for years, for decades. It's amazing it's taken this long for it to catch up with them. And I think all the while their attitude's been, we're just gonna keep doing it as long as we can. We know it's a problem, we're just gonna keep doing it, and one of these days they're gonna be forced to stop. And they're gonna have to reconfigure everything to find a way to pay the players and let them transfer wherever they wanna go.
Do you think that would have an influence on the future of the NCAA?
I think at a certain point, the NCAA just needs to go away. It's pointless. I mean, it's toothless at this point, and I think these various lawsuits that are out there are only going to cause everyone to realize there's no reason to have it. Now, it's going to make it harder for West Virginia University. It really is, and there will be tiered systems of college basketball and football because where the money is, that's going to get the best players. They're going to be paying the highest rate. It's going to be hard to compete with the Alabamas and the Georgias and the USCs and the Texas with the huge, very wealthy booster population they have. So it's going to change everything, but it needs to happen. It's long overdue, and it's only fair for the kids to get paid what they deserve. Yes?
Mike, as an analyst, let's compare you to like somebody like Booger McFarland who played. When you critique a player like Jared Goff, like you just said, or whatever, and Booger McFarland would say the same thing. The player's more likely to strike back at you versus them because they played the game and that kind of thing.
Well, first of all, I don't care. As long as the check clears, I don't care if they strike back. And you gotta learn to have thick skin in this business, because you're gonna, if you offer criticism, and if it's fair criticism, it's not personal. Like sometimes it'll be a personal attack, or there'll be some edge to it, where the person who's offering the criticism seems to be happy about it. They're happy that someone's failing. They expect me to give my opinion on what I see. And if someone wants to denigrate it by saying, oh, you've never played, well, okay, here's a guy that played for 3 years. I've been doing this for 23 years, following it every day, every waking moment, except when I'm reading books. Every waking moment, I pay attention to it, I think about it, I live it, I breathe it. I'd say after a certain period of time, it doesn't matter if I didn't play. I've been paying attention to it, I've been plugged into that matrix long enough that I can compare one player to another and I can have a reliable opinion as to whether or not somebody's doing any good. And if they don't like it, they don't like it. Again, as long as the check's clear, I don't care if they don't like it. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
What's your opinion of Kenny Pickett?
Kenny Pickett does nothing special. There's nothing he does that you look at and you say, wow, how about that? Or, ooh, do that again. It's very down the middle, basic, average, nothing spectacular. There was a dust up this week because Cam Newton, who was the NFL MVP in 2015, and he's been out of the league for a couple of years trying to get back in, he called a couple of different quarterbacks game managers. Brock Purdy of the 49ers, who's not a game manager, Tua Tagovailoa of the Dolphins, Dak Prescott of the Cowboys, and Jared Goff. None of them are really game managers. Goff is probably the closest. Kenny Pickett is a game manager. Kenny Pickett's a guy that you hope he doesn't screw up, and you let the rest of the team do the job. Let the defense do the job, special teams do the job, running game do the job, and a throw here, a throw there, but nothing more than that. And they're going to have a decision to make. This is a team that does not like change. Ownership there does not like to do drastic things. They don't like to admit they made mistakes. I think they made a mistake with Kenny Pickett, and the question is, are they going to admit it after this year? They're going to have some options out there. Some quarterbacks will be available in the draft. They'll be available in trade. Free agents, and they're going to have a decision to make. And it'll be interesting to see whether or not they're willing to admit that they got the wrong guy in Kenny Pickett. Anyone else?
What do you think of Roethlisberger's comments about the team?
Well, let me think. Let me think of how best to say this. It doesn't surprise me. It really doesn't. He's trying to retain some relevance. He's trying to rattle the cage a little bit, stir things up. There may be some hard feelings. He felt like he got pushed out the door. And his last year, where he was a shell of what he was when he was younger, they made him an offer that they thought he would refuse. And it surprised them when he accepted it. So there was a lot of tension that last year. He knew they really didn't want him there, but he still wanted to play one more year. So does he have some hard feelings? Yes. And is this an opportunity for him to act on it and call out Mike Tomlin? Yes. So it doesn't surprise me when he said what he said. He may not be wrong, but he's criticizing the same guy who has managed to get something out of less. You know, he takes a group of players who individually look at and say, these guys aren't good enough to make it to the playoffs, and he gets them to the playoffs. He's never had a losing season since he became the head coach in 2007. There's something to be said for that. I say this all the time when you hear the cries, get rid of Tomlin. Be careful what you wish for. Because number one, you're going to find somebody better, which isn't easy. And number two, he's going to go somewhere else. And you may say, well, he's doing pretty well there. Okay, can we get him back? So and it could happen as soon as this year. There's something there that feels like it's off. Now, 4 games left, a lot can happen. They lose tomorrow, it's getting a little closer. They lose the next week, it's getting a little closer. And it feels like it's just starting to wobble. And it's been like that before, but they always find a way to end up with a winning record, or at least a non-losing record, and more often than not, they get to the playoffs. It's a crazy last 4 weeks of the season. There's so many teams that are still alive, so many teams that are in, and jobs are going to be saved and jobs are going to be lost based on who makes the playoffs and who doesn't make the playoffs. Just like today. Horrible game last night from the Chargers that gets the coach and the GM thrown out the door. Question, is there a hand over here? Anything more? Anything else? Like an option here.
Pittsburgh sports. What do you think of the Pirates?
I have not followed the Pirates since Game 7 of the 1992 NLCS, when Sid Bream, former Pirate, then a member of the Braves, somehow scored from second base. Barry Bonds somehow didn't throw him out at home, and that was that. And I knew what was coming. I didn't think it would be 30 years until they'd have a competitive team again. I know they've been to the playoffs a couple of times, but I don't count that one game and done as playoffs. They have been in a playoff series since then, and I just don't pay any attention. It's easy to be all in on football and not pay attention to the Pirates. But when I was a kid, I was as interested in the Pirates as I was in what was happening in the NFL. And I think at times even more interested in the Pirates. So it's sad that it's happened, and I don't know how they get their way out of it. Well, I know how they get their way out of it. They need a financial system like the NFL has, where you don't have teams with a lot of money and teams with no money. They paid Shohei Ohtani $700 million over 10 years. The Pirates can't do that. Only a team like the Dodgers can, or the Yankees, or the Red Sox, or something like that. So.
That's just out of sight.
Well, but they earn it. I always defend what players get paid, because let me tell you, whatever they commit to pay the players, there's a lot more where that came from. None of these owners have ever gone bankrupt, at least not in the last 50 years. They are all making, just anytime that they mention concerns about NFL revenue, I'd say about half the owners have a yacht the size of an aircraft carrier. They're all doing fine. And even if their team is losing, they're still doing fine, because they're making a ton of money, and it keeps going up each and every year. I mean, it's in the $15-20 billion range, and it keeps going up and up. They're trying to globalize the sport, because they know if they could get people in other countries as interested as we are in pro football, it mushrooms.
Yeah, we're the paid curves on this whole thing, because it takes seats from $15, $20 to $150, and you're seeing a lousy team. And when you go to a game, and there's 8,500 to maybe 12,000 people in a 65,000 seat stadium, you think somebody at the top of these scratch heads saying, man, we gotta go a little more than we're doing right now.
A lot of money comes from TV. I mean, they're still making a profit. Even with that small of attendance, they're still making a profit. It's still a viable business. And the question is, how much more money do you want to put in? How much more are we going to get out? And look, sport, we're attracted to it as fans because we love the sport. The people who own the teams, they don't lead with this. It's a business, and they're trying to make money. I say this all the time. The NFL likes to say football is family. The truth is, football is business, and they say football is family because it's good for business to say football is family. And that is the 100% truth. It's all a business. It's fun to watch, and they love it when we do, but at the end of the day, they're trying to make as much money as possible. And the NFL especially is succeeding unlike any other sport in the country. Anything else?
One more thing. Do you have any feelings on the Western University, Colton McKibbitz, who's now starting with the 49ers?
I don't have any strong feelings other than the fact that if he's starting, he's doing well enough, because it's hard to win a starting job in the NFL. Think about how many NFL teams there are, and think about how many colleges there are every year putting out another class of seniors or underclassmen who enter the draft. And it is a very steep hill to climb to get yourself into a position where you are a regular contributor on an NFL team. So you're beating the odds. If you go from starting in college to starting in the NFL, you are beating the odds. The players in the NFL are the best of the best of the best that college football's had to offer for the last 10 or 15 years. And that's why every year when the draft comes around, they say, is this player going to be good? Is that player going to be good? You don't know until you get out there and compete. Not with that group of college players where there's some guys who are pretty good and some guys who aren't. You're competing against the best of the best of the best all the time. And some guys respond well and some guys just never make it. Anything else? I see that Miami Dolphins hat back there. It's tenuous times for the Dolphins.
They blew it last week.
And now they may not have Tyreek Hill for Sunday's game against the Jets. And it could be week 18, Bills-Dolphins determines who wins that division. It's amazing. And that's one of the things great about the NFL. Things can turn so quickly. When you think you've got it figured out, you realize you don't know anything.
Do you think
Which makes me perfect for the job. Who?
Belichick?
Yeah, Belichick's going to be gone. The only question is, how is it going to happen? The owner, I think, wants to have his cake and eat it too. He wants to be able to tell Belichick to go, and he wants to get another team to give him a draft pick, first round pick, second round pick for the remainder of Belichick's contract. And if I'm Belichick, why am I doing that? If you don't want me here, fire me and let me go pick my next team. Why do I want to give you one of my draft picks that I'm going to use to try to make my team better? If you want me, I'll stay and you can pay me. If you don't want me, fire me, and I don't have to worry about my next team having to give up something.
Right.
And I think that's how it's going to end. I think they're going to try to finagle some sort of a deal, but Belichick's going to dig in his heels and he's going to get fired. Or they're going to come up with a deal where they let him walk away, but they agree they're not going to try to get a draft pick from wherever he goes. And I was talking to somebody from the Patriots this week, because everybody thinks he's going to go to like the Commanders or the Buccaneers or the Chargers. Watch the playoffs carefully. The first round and the second round of the playoffs. There's going to be a team that loses, that has a lot of talent, and they're going to lose in a way that traces back to the coach. And the owner's going to wake up the next morning and say, I need Belichick. That's where I think he's going to go. It's going to be one of these teams that has the pieces in place, but the coach screws up, the coach is out, and in comes Belichick. And he'll be in position to be competitive right away instead of going to a team that's starting from scratch. Yes?
Are your children interested in the NFL or any of that?
My son is 27, and he is working with me now. He is very concerned about nepotism. And I've been trying for years to get him to understand this isn't dad getting you a job where dad works. Because a lot of it, there's plenty of fathers and sons who are in sports media. My partner 4 days a week on PFG Live, Chris Sims. His dad is Phil Sims. And he played in the NFL for a few years, but he didn't have the career that his dad had. And everybody comes at him and says, you're only in the media because of your dad. It's all because of your dad. And my son sees that and he takes it to heart and he's like, I don't want to have to deal with that. And I try to get him to understand, to go back to the pizza example, this is a business that we own. If it was a pizza shop, someday I'm going to die and you need to be ready to take over. And that's what this is. And if people don't want to understand that, that's their problem. And he's gradually getting to that point. So he's working with me more and more. And I hope one of these days he is willing to put his name out there as being directly involved, his name on articles, appearing with me on podcasts or wherever. But the concern is, and I would have the same concern too, in this day and age, especially the way social media is so hateful and it's so nasty and it warps minds in such a detrimental way, I can understand why he's concerned. But hopefully he'll get through that sooner rather than later.
Is his name Michael?
His first name's Michael, his middle name's Alexander. That was my mom's maiden name, so he's Alex. Anything else? Yes.
Believe this year the Cowboys make a run into the playoffs?
No. Next question. We're going to find out the next 2 weeks. They're great at home. They go to Buffalo and win. Okay. They go to Miami and win. Okay. They need to have playoff games at home and they need to prove they can be a great team on the road. At the end of the day, the 49ers are the best team in the NFL by 4. They beat the Cowboys and the Eagles by the combined score of 84-29. Unless they suffer some key injuries to their best players, the 49ers are going to win the Super Bowl. But there's a good chance they'll suffer some key injuries because they play in such a reckless, renegade type of way that they do get guys injured. And we saw it happen last year in the NFC Championship. They would have won that game against Philadelphia. It was a quarterback on the first drive, and that's it. So it's the 49ers and it's everyone else, unless somebody gets hurt on the 49ers, and then maybe the door's open for the Cowboys, maybe. I would never believe the Cowboys, as great as the Cowboys were from 1970 to 1995, the idea that they wouldn't be back to the NFC Championship game in nearly 30 years. I would have bet everything I own that at some point since 1995, they'd at least be back to the NFC Championship. It really is stunning. And to tie together a couple of points, the Cowboys are a team to watch for Belichick. If Mike McCarthy screws up, he's the head coach now, if he screws something up in the playoffs and they lose because of that, they've got the quarterback. They've got Michael Parsons, who is basically a young Lawrence Taylor, who Belichick coached with the Giants in the 80s. I think Belichick would be interested in going there, and it would be easy for him to get that team to where it wants to go. Sure thing. All right, last call. Yes.
Back to your writing, as you were describing your themes at the beginning, did anything think of Mitch Allen's 5 People in Heaven in Just One More Day? Am I based on that?
Well, it's funny. I didn't read either of those two books. I read Tuesdays with Maury back in the late 90s, which had a tremendous impact on me. It is an incredible perspective book about the years of your life, the seasons of your life. You go through the various years, and if you're lucky, you get to the very end in an old age and everything that goes along with that. But yeah, now I'm going to have to read those books and see what's in there. But the bottom line is, whether I intended it or not, it's the perfect time of year for people to reconcile relationships with family members, and that is one of the unintended, very clear messages that comes through and on our way home. And hopefully it'll help some people, inspire some people to do that throughout this holiday season. And what I plan to do, I'll just dust it off every Thanksgiving, make it available again, and just make it an annual thing. The story itself requires no year. It's not set in any one time. You can come back year after year after year, and hopefully people will benefit from it. Hopefully, I may have said this when I was here in August, when you write every day, and by tomorrow what you wrote today is completely meaningless, and by Sunday what I read on Saturday will be completely meaningless because you're constantly following the NFL and there's news every day. Over the years, I've written millions of words. It would be nice to write something that lasts a little longer than a day or two. And if I could bring this book back every Christmas season, and people buy it, and people read it, and maybe one of these days when I'm dead and gone, people are still reading it, that would be pretty good. So that's kind of what the goal is, and we'll see if this one gets there. So thank you all so much for coming out today. I know we got a lot going on during the holidays. It's great to be back. I appreciate it very much. I got plenty of copies this time. I need to bring the copies. I got plenty this time.
And I'll sign it for Right. Okay. I go to sign it. You know what? When I was in first grade, the nuns.
You said you went to Catholic school.
Yeah, changed another left-handed person.